Good evening, my friends. Tonight's going to be exciting because we start a new book, and the story in this book made one of my favorite movies. The book is titled The Maltese Falcon and was written by acclaimed author Dashiell Hammett. From that book, we got our first movie in the film noir genre. So it's very important that hard-boiled detective and femme fatale story that spawned so many more books and so many more movies in the noir, or in cinema, the film noir genre. The story is about a San Francisco detective, Sam Spade, who takes on a case that involves him with three eccentric criminals, a gorgeous liar, and their quest for a priceless statuette. The director of the film was John Huston, who collaborated with the book's author Dashiell Hammett to write the screenplay for the movie, and it starred some of my favorite actors, including Humphrey Bogart, Mary Astor, Gladys George, and let's see, who else did we have in there? We had Peter Lorre, fantastic actor, and Sidney Greenstreet. These were some of the key actors that went on to make many more movies in the 1940s, some of which included other works in the film noir genre. So I'm very excited to read this book, as I have not read the original book by Dashiell Hammett before today. But I've seen the movie dozens of times. So let's just dig on in and get started with Chapter 1 of The Maltese Falcon. Spade and Archer. Samuel Spade's jaw was long and bony, his chin a jutting V under the more flexible V of his mouth. His nostrils curved back to make another smaller V. His yellow-gray eyes were horizontal. The V motif was picked up again by thickish brows rising outward from twin creases above a hooked nose, and his pale brown hair grew down from high flat temples in a point on his forehead. He looked rather pleasantly like a blonde Satan. He said to Effie Perrine, "Yes, sweetheart?" She was a lanky, sunburned girl whose tan dress of thin woolen stuff clung to her with an effect of dampness. Her eyes were brown and playful, in a shiny, boyish face. She finished shutting the door behind her, leaned against it, and said, "There's a girl wants to see you. Her name is Wonderly." "A customer?" "I guess so. You'll want to see her anyway. She's a knockout." "Shoo her in, darlin'," said Spade. "Shoo her in." Effie Perrine opened the door again, following it back into the outer office, standing with her hand on the knob while saying, "Will you come in, Miss Wonderly?" A voice said, "Thank you," so softly that only the purest articulation made the words intelligible, and a young woman came through the doorway. She advanced slowly, with tentative steps, looking at Spade with cobalt blue eyes that were both shy and probing. She was tall and pliantly slender, without angularity anywhere. Her body was erect and high-breasted, her legs long, her hands and feet narrow. She wore two shades of blue that had been selected because of her eyes. The hair curling from under her blue hat was darkly red. Her eyes, rather her full lips, more brightly red. White teeth glistened in the crescent her timid smile made. Spade rose, bowing and indicating with a thick-fingered hand the oaken armchair beside his desk. He was quite 6 feet tall. The steep, rounded slope of his shoulders made his body seem almost conical, no broader than it was thick, and kept his freshly pressed coat from fitting very well. Miss Wonderly murmured, "Thank you," softly, before she sat down on the edge of the chair's wooden seat. Spade sank into his swivel chair, made a quarter turn to face her, smiled politely. He smiled without separating his lips. All the V's in his face grew longer. The tappity tap tap and the thin bell and muffled whirl of Effie Perrine's typing came through the closed door. Somewhere in the neighboring office, a power-driven machine vibrated dully. On Spade's desk, a limp cigarette smoldered in a brass tray filled with the remains of limp cigarettes. Ragged gray flakes of cigarette ash dotted the yellow top of the desk and the green blotter and the papers that were there. A buff curtained window, 8 or 10 inches open, let in from the court a current of air faintly scented with ammonia. The ashes on the desk twitched and crawled in the current. Miss Wonderly watched the gray flakes twitch and crawl. Her eyes were uneasy. She sat on the very edge of the chair. Her feet were flat on the floor, as if she were about to rise. Her hands in dark gloves clasped a flat, dark handbag in her lap. Spade rocked back in his chair and asked, "Now, what can I do for you, Miss Wonderly?" She caught her breath and looked at him. She swallowed and said hurriedly, "Could you? That is..." Then she tortured her lower lip with glistening teeth and said nothing. Only her dark eyes spoke now, pleading. Spade smiled, nodded as if he understood her, but pleasantly, as if nothing serious were involved. He said, "Suppose you tell me about it from the beginning, and then we'll know what needs doing. Better begin as far back as you can." "That was in New York." "Yes." "I don't know where she met him. I don't know where in New York. She's 5 years younger than I, only 17, and we didn't have the same friends. I don't suppose we've ever been as close as sisters should be. Mama and Papa are in Europe. It would kill them. I've got to get her back before they come home." "Yes," he said. "They're coming home the 1st of the month." Spade's eyes brightened. "Then we've got 2 weeks," he said. I didn't know what she had done until her letter came. I was frantic. Her lips trembled. Her hands mashed the dark handbag in her lap. I was too afraid she had done something like this to go to the police, and the fear that something had happened to her kept me urging me to go on. There wasn't anyone I could go to for advice. I didn't know what to do. What could I do? "Nothing, of course," Spade said. "But then her letter came." "Yes." "And I sent her a telegram asking her to come home. I sent it to General Delivery here. That was the only address she gave me. I waited a whole week, but no answer came, not another word from her. And Mama and Papa's return was drawing nearer and nearer, so I came to San Francisco to get her. I wrote to her I was coming. I shouldn't have done that, but, well, should I? Maybe not. It's not always easy to know what to do. You haven't found her?" "No, I haven't. I wrote to her that I would go to St. Mark, and I begged her to come and let me talk to her, even if she didn't intend to go home with me. But she didn't come. I waited 3 days, and she didn't come. Didn't even send a message of any sort." Spade nodded his blonde Satan's head, frowned sympathetically, and tightened his lips together. "It's horrible," Miss Wenderley said, trying to smile. "I couldn't sit there like that, waiting, not knowing what happened to her, what might be happening to her." She stopped trying to smile. She shuddered. "The only address I had was General Delivery. I wrote her another letter, and yesterday afternoon I went to the post office. I stayed there until after dark, but I didn't see her. I went there again this morning, and I still didn't see Corinne. But I saw Floyd Thursby." Spade nodded again. His frown went away. In its place came a look of sharp attentiveness. "He wouldn't tell me where Corinne was," she went on, hopelessly. "He wouldn't tell me anything except that she was, well, happy. But how can I believe that? That is what he would tell anyone, anyhow, isn't it?" "Sure," Spade agreed, "but it might be true." "I hope it is. I do hope it is," she exclaimed. but I can't go back home like this without having seen her, without having talked to her on the phone. He wouldn't take me to her. He said she didn't want to see me. I can't believe that. He promised to tell her he'd seen me and to bring her to see me if she would come this evening at the hotel. He said he knew she wouldn't. He promised to come himself if she wouldn't. She broke off with a startled hand to her mouth as the door opened. The man who had opened the door came in a step and said, "Oh, excuse me," hastily took his brown hat from his head and backed out. "It's all right, Miles," Spade told him. "Come in, Miss Wonderly. This is Mr. Archer, my partner." Miles Archer came into the office, shutting the door behind him, ducking his head and smiling at Miss Wonderly, making a vaguely polite gesture with the hat in his hand. He was of medium height, solidly built, wide in the shoulders, thick in the neck, with a jovial, heavy-jawed red face, and some gray in his close-trimmed hair. He was apparently as many years past 40 as Spade was past 30. Spade said, "Miss Wonderly, Miss Wonderly's sister here ran away from New York with a fellow named Floyd Thursby. They're here. Miss Wonderly has seen Thursby and has a date with him tonight. Maybe he'll bring the sister with him. The chances are he won't. Miss Wonderly wants to find out the sister and get away with her and get her away from him and back home." He looked at Miss Wonderly. "Right?" "Yes," she said instinctively. The embarrassment that had gradually been driven away by Spade's ingratiating smiles and nods and assurances was pinkening up her face. She looked at the bag in her lap and picked nervously at it with a gloved finger. Spade winked at his partner. Miles Archer came forward to stand at the corner of the desk. While the girl looked at her bag, he looked at her. His little brown eyes ran their bold, appraising gaze from her lowered face to her feet and up to her face again. Then he looked at Spade and made a silent, whistling mouth of appreciation. Spade lifted 2 fingers from one arm of his chair in a brief warning gesture and said, "We shouldn't have any trouble finding her. There shouldn't be any trouble with it, right? It's simply a matter of having a man at the hotel this evening to shadow him. And when he leaves, that shadow will lead us to your sister. If she comes with him, and you persuade her to return with you, so much the better. Otherwise, if she doesn't want to leave him after we've found her, well, we'll find a way of managing that." Archer said, "Yeah." His voice was heavy and coarse. Miss Wonderly looked up at Spade, quickly puckering her forehead between her eyebrows. "Oh, but you must be careful." Her voice shook a little, and her lips shaped the words with nervous jerkiness. "I'm deathly afraid of him, of what he might do. She's so young, and his bringing her here from New York is such a serious... Mightn't he do something to her?" Spade smiled and patted the arms of his chair. "Just leave it to us," he said. "We'll know how to handle him." "But mightn't he?" she insisted. "There's always a chance." Spade nodded judiciously. "But you can trust us to take care of that." "I do trust you," she said earnestly. "But I want you to know that he's a dangerous man. I honestly don't think he'd stop at anything. I don't believe he'd hesitate to kill Corinne if he thought it would save him. Mightn't he do that?" You didn't threaten him, did you?" "I told him that all I wanted was to get home, to get her home before Mama and Papa came, so they'd never know what she'd done. I promised him I'd never say a word to them about it if he helped me, but he didn't. But, if he didn't, Papa would certainly see that he was punished. I don't suppose he believed me altogether." "Can he cover up by marrying her?" Archer asked. The girl blushed and replied in a confused voice, He has a wife and 3 children in England. Corinne wrote me that to explain why she'd gone off with him. They usually do, Spade said, though not always in England. He leaned forward to reach for a pencil and a pad of paper. What does she look like? Oh, he's 35 years old, perhaps, and as tall as you, and either naturally dark or quite sunburned. His hair is dark, too, and he has thick eyebrows. He talks in a rather loud, blustery way and has a nervous, irritable manner. He gives the impression of being, of violence. Spade, scribbling on the pad, asked without looking up, "What color eyes?" "They're blue-gray and watery, though not in a weak way, and, he has a marked cleft in his chin." "Thin, medium, or heavy build?" "Quite athletic. He's broad-shouldered and carries himself erect. Has what could be called a decidedly military carriage. He was wearing a light gray suit and a gray hat when I saw him this morning." "What does he do for a living?" Spade asked, as he laid down his pencil. "I don't know," she said. "I haven't the slightest idea. What time is he coming to see you?" "After 8 o'clock. "All right, Miss Wonderly. We'll have a man there. It'll help if, Mr. Spade, could either you or Mr. Archer," she made an appealing gesture with both hands, "could either of you look after it personally? I don't mean that the man you'll send wouldn't be capable, but, I'm so afraid of what might happen to Corinne. I'm afraid of him. Could you? I'd expect to be charged more, of course." She opened her handbag with nervous fingers and put $200 bills on Spade's desk. Would that be enough?" "Yeah," Archer said, "and I'll look after it myself." Miss Wonderly stood up, impulsively holding a hand out to him. Thank you," she exclaimed, and then gave Spade her hand, repeating, "Thank you." "Not at all," Spade said over it. "Glad to. It'll help some if you either meet Thursby downstairs or let yourself be seen in the lobby with him at some time." "I will," she promised, and thanked the partners again. "And don't look for me," Archer cautioned her. "I'll see you, all right." Spade went to the corridor door with Miss Wonderly. When he returned to his desk, Archer nodded at the $100 bills there, growled complacently, "They're right enough," picked one up, folded it, and tucked it into a vest pocket, and they had brothers in their bag. Spade pocketed the other bill before he sat down. Then he said, "Well, don't dynamite her too much. What do you think of her?" "Sweet. And you telling me not to dynamite her?" Archer guffawed suddenly without merriment. "Maybe you saw her first, Sam, but I spoke first." He put his hands in his trouser pockets and teetered on his heels. "You'll play hell with her, you will?" Spade grinned wolfishly, showing the edges of teeth far back in his jaws. "You've got brains. Yes, you have." He began to make a cigarette. Chapter 2. Death in the Fog. A telephone bell rang in darkness. When it had rung 3 times, bed springs creaked, fingers mumbled and fumbled on wood. Something small and hard thudded on a carpeted floor. The springs creaked again, and a man's voice said, "Hello?" "Yes, speaking." "Dead?" "Yes. 15 minutes, thanks." A switch clicked, and a white bowl hung on 3 gilded chains from the ceiling in the center, filled the room with light. Spade, barefooted, in green and white checkered pajamas, sat on the side of the bed. He scowled at the telephone on the table, while his hands took from beside it a packet of brown papers and a sack of Bull Durham tobacco. Cold, steamy air blew in through 2 open windows, bringing with it 6 times a minute the Alcatraz foghorn's dull moaning. A tinny alarm clock, insecurely mounted on a corner of Duke's Celebrated Criminal Cases of America, face down on the table, held its hands at 5 minutes past 2. Spade's thick fingers made a cigarette with deliberate care, sifting a measured quantity of tan flakes down into curved paper, spreading the flakes so that they lay equal at ends with a slight depression in the middle. Thumbs rolling the paper's inner edges down and up under the outer edges as forefingers pressed in over. Thumbs and fingers sliding to the paper's cylinder ends to hold it even while tongue licked the flap. Left forefinger and thumb pinching their end, while right finger and thumb smoothed the damp seam. Right forefinger and thumb twisting their end and lifting the other to Spade's mouth. He picked up the pigskin and nickel lighter that had fallen to the floor, manipulated it, and with a cigarette burning in the corner of his mouth, stooped and stood up. He took off his pajamas. The smooth thickness of his arms, legs, and body, the sag of his big rounded shoulders, made his body like a bear's. It was like a shaved bear's. His chest was hairless. His skin was childishly soft and pink. He scratched the back of his neck and began to dress. He put on a thin white union suit, gray socks, black garters, and dark brown shoes. When he had fastened his shoes, he picked up the telephone, called Greystone 4500, and ordered a taxicab. He put on a green-striped white shirt, a soft white collar, a green necktie, the gray suit he had worn that day, a loose tweed overcoat, and a dark gray hat. The street doorbell rang as he stuffed tobacco, keys, and money into his pockets. Where Bush Street roofed Stockton before slipping downhill to Chinatown, Spade paid his fare and left the taxicab. San Francisco's night fog, thin, clammy, and penetrant, blurred the streets. A few yards from where Spade had dismissed the taxicab, a small group of men stood looking up an alley. Two women stood with a man on the other side of Bush Street, looking at the alley. There were faces at windows. Spade crossed the sidewalk between the iron-railed hatchways that opened above bare, ugly stairs, went to the parapet, and, resting his hands on the damp coping, looked down into Stockton Street. An automobile popped out of the tunnel beneath him with a roaring swish, as if it had been blown out, and ran away. Not far from the tunnel's mouth, a man was hunkered on his heels before a billboard that held advertisements of a moving picture and a gasoline across the front of a gap between two store buildings. The hunkered man's head was bent almost to the sidewalk so he could look under the billboard. A hand flat on the paving, a hand clenched on the billboard's green frame, held him in this grotesque position. Two other men stood awkwardly together at one end of the billboard, peeping through a few inches of space between it and the building at the end. The building at the other end had a blank gray sidewall that looked down on the lot behind the billboard. Lights flickering on the sidewall, and the shadows of men moving among lights. Spade turned from the parapet and walked up Bush Street to the alley where the men were grouped. A uniformed policeman chewing gum under an enameled sign that said Burritt Street in white against dark blue put out an arm and asked, "What do you want here?" "I'm Sam Spade. Tom Polis phoned me." "Sure you are." The policeman's arm went down. "I didn't know you at first." "Well, they're back there." He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. "Bad business." "Bad enough," Spade agreed and went up the alley. Halfway up it, not far from the entrance, a dark ambulance stood. Behind the ambulance to the left, the alley was bounded by a waist-high fence, horizontal strips of rough boarding. From the fence, dark ground fell away steeply to the billboard on Stockton Street below. A 10-foot length of fence top rail had been torn from the post at one end and hung dangling from the other. 15 feet down the slope, a flat boulder stuck out. In the notch between the boulder and the slope, Miles Archer lay on his back. Two men stood over him. One of them held the beam of an electric torch over the dead man. The other men with lights moved up and down the slope. One of them hailed Spade. "Hello, Sam," and clambered up to the alley, his shadow running up the slope before him. He was a barrel-bellied tall man with shrewd small eyes, a thick mouth, and carelessly shaven dark jowls. His shoes, knees, hands, and chin were daubed with brown loam. "I figured you'd want to see it before we took him away," he said as he stepped over the broken fence. "Thanks, Tom," Spade said. "What happened?" He put an elbow on the fence post and looked down at the men below, nodding to those who nodded to him. Tom Pullis poked his own left breast with a dirty finger. "Got him right through the pump with this." He took a fat revolver from his coat pocket and held it out to Spade. Mud inlaid the depressions in the revolver's surface. "A Webley. English, ain't it?" Spade took his elbow from the fence post and leaned down to look at the weapon, but he didn't touch it. "Yes," he said. "Webley Fosbury automatic revolver. That's it. 38. 8 shot. They don't make them anymore." "How many gone out of it?" "1 pill." Tom poked his breast again. "He must have been dead when he cracked the fence." He raised the muddy revolver. "Ever seen this before?" Spade nodded. "I've seen Webley Fosbury's," he said, without interest, and then spoke rapidly. "He was shot up here." "Huh?" "Standing where you are, with his back to the fence. The man that shot him stands here." He went around to the front of Tom and raised his hand breast high and leveled the forefinger. "That's him. Let's him have it." And Miles goes back, taking the top off the fence and going through and down till the rock catches him. "That's it." "That's it," Tom replied slowly, working his brows together. "The blast burnt his coat." "Who found him?" "The man on the beat, Schilling. He was coming down Bush, and he just got here, a machine turning through headlights up here, and he saw the top off the fence, so he came to look at it and found him." "What about the machine that was turning round?" "Not a damn thing about it, Sam. Schilling didn't pay any attention to it, not knowing anything was wrong then. He says nobody didn't come out from here while he was going and coming down from Powell's, or he'd have seen him. The only other way out would be under the billboard on Stockton. Nobody went that way. The fog's got the ground soggy, and the only marks are where Miles slid down and where this here gun rolled." "Didn't anybody hear the shot?" "For the love of God, Sam, we only just got here. Somebody must have heard it when we find them." He turned and put his leg over the fence, coming down for a look at him before he's moved. Spade said, "Nope." Tom halted astride the fence and looked back at Spade with surprised small eyes. Spade said, "You've seen him. You'd see everything. I could." Tom, still looking at Spade, nodded doubtfully and withdrew his leg over the fence. "His gun was tucked away up on his hip," he said. "It hadn't been fired. His overcoat was buttoned. There's 160-some bucks in his clothes. Was he working, Sam?" Spade, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. Tom asked, "Well?" "He was supposed to be tailing a fellow named Floyd Thursby," Spade said, and described Thursby as Miss Wonderly had described him. "What for?" Spade put his hands to his overcoat pockets and blinked sleepy eyes at Tom. Tom repeated impatiently, "What for?" "He was an Englishman, maybe. I don't know what his game was exactly. We were trying to find out where he lived." Spade grimly fainted. Spade grinned and faintly and took his hand from his pocket to pat Tom's shoulder. "Don't crowd me." He put the hand in his pocket again. "I'm going out to break the news to Miles' wife." He turned away. Tom, scowling, opened his mouth, closed it without having said anything, cleared his throat, put the scowl off his face, and spoke with a husky sort of gentleness. "It's tough, him getting it like that. Miles had his faults, same as the rest of us, but I guess he must have had some good points, too. I guess so. Spade agreed in a tone that was utterly meaningless and went out of the alley. In an all-night drugstore on the corner of Bush and Taylor Streets, Spade used a telephone. Precious, he said into a little while after he had the number. Miles has been shot. Yes, he's dead. Now, don't get excited. Yes, you'll have to break it to Iva. No, I'm damned if I will. You've got to do it. That's a good girl. And keep her away from the office. Tell her I'll see her, sometime. Yes, but don't tie me up to anything. That's the stuff. You're an angel. Bye. Spade's tiny alarm clock said 3:40 when he turned on the light in his suspended bowl again. He dropped his hat and overcoat on the bed and went to his kitchen. Returning to the bedroom with a wine glass and a tall bottle of Bacardi, he poured a drink and drank it standing. He put the bottle and the glass on the table, sat on the side of the bed facing them, and rolled a cigarette. He had drunk his third glass of Bacardi and was lighting his fifth cigarette when the street doorbell rang. The hands of the alarm clock registered 4:30. Spade sighed, rose from the bed, and went to the telephone box beside his bedroom door. He pressed the button that released the street door lock. He muttered, "Damn her," and stood scowling at the back of the telephone box, breathing irregularly while a dull flush grew over his cheeks. The grating and rattling of the elevator door opening and closing came from the corridor. Spade sighed again and moved towards the corridor door. Soft, heavy steps sounded on the carpet floor outside, the footsteps of two men. Spade's face brightened. His eyes were no longer harassed. He opened the door quickly. "Hello, Tom," he said to the barrel-bellied tall detective with whom he had talked in Burritt Street, and "Hello, Lieutenant," to the man beside Tom. "Come in." They nodded together, neither saying anything, and came in. Spade shut the door and ushered them into his bedroom. Tom sat down on an inn sofa by the window. The lieutenant sat in an armchair by the table. The lieutenant was a compactly built man, with a round head under a short-cut grizzled hair, and a square face behind a short-cut grizzled mustache. A $5 gold piece was pinned to his necktie, and there was a small elaborate diamond-set secret society emblem on his lapel. Spade brought 2 wine glasses from the kitchen, filled them with his own Bacardi, gave one to each of his visitors, and sat down with his on his side of the bed. His face was placid and uncurious. He raised his glass and said, "Success to crime," and drank it down. Tom emptied his glass, set it on the floor beside his feet, and wiped his mouth with a muddy forefinger. He stared at the foot of the bed as if trying to remember something which it vaguely reminded him. The lieutenant looked at his glass for a dozen seconds, took a very small sip of its contents, and put the glass on the table at his elbow. He examined the room with hard, deliberate eyes and then looked at Tom. Tom moved uncomfortably on the sofa and, not looking up, asked, "Did you break the news to Miles' wife, Sam?" Spade said, "Uh-huh." "How'd she take it?" Spade shook his head. "I don't know anything about women." Tom said softly, "The hell you don't." The lieutenant put his hands on his knees and leaned forward. His greenish eyes were fixed on Spade in a peculiarly rigid stare, as if their focus were a matter of mechanics, to be changed only by pulling a lever or pressing a button. "What kind of gun do you carry?" he asked. "None. I don't like them much." "Of course, there are some in the office." "I'd like to see one of them," the lieutenant said. "You don't happen to have one here?" "No." "You sure of that?" "Look around." Spade smiled and waved his empty glass a little. "Turn the dump upside down if you want. I don't squawk." "If you've got a search warrant," Tom protested. "Oh, hell, Sam." Spade set his glass on the table and stood up, facing the lieutenant. "What do you want, Dundee?" he asked in a voice hard and cold as his eyes. Lieutenant Dundee's eyes had moved to maintain their focus on Spade's. Only his eyes had moved. Tom shifted his weight on the sofa again, blew a deep breath right out of his nose, and growled plaintively. "We're not wanting to make any trouble, Sam." Spade, ignoring Tom, said to Dundee, "Well, what do you want? Talk turkey." "Who in the hell do you think you are, coming in here and trying to rope me?" "All right," Dundee said in his chest. "Sit down and listen." "I'll sit or I'll stand as I damn please," said Spade, not moving. "For Christ's sake, be reasonable," Tom begged. "What's the use of having a row? If you want to know why we didn't talk turkey, it's because when I asked you who this Thursby was, you as good as told me it was none of my business. You can't treat us that way, Sam. It ain't right, and it won't get you anywheres. We got our own work to do." Lieutenant Dundee jumped up, stood close to Spade, and thrust his square face at the taller man's. "I've warned you. Your foot's was going to slip one of these days," he said. Spade made a depreciative mouth, raising his eyebrows. "Everybody's foot slips sometime," he replied with a derisive mildness, "and this is yours." Spade smiled and shook his head. "No, I'll do nicely, thank you." He stopped smiling. His upper lip on his left side twitched over his eye tooth. His eyes became narrow and sultry. His voice came out as the lieutenant's. "I don't like this. What are you suckering around for? Tell me, or I'll get out and let me go to bed." "Who's Thursby?" Dundee demanded. "I told Tom what I knew about him." "You told Tom damn little." "I knew damn little." "Why are you tailing him?" I wasn't. Miles was. "For the swell reason that we had a client who was paying good United States money to have him tailed." "Who's the client?" Placidity came back to Spade's face and voice. He said reprovingly, "You know I can't tell you that until I've talked it over with the client." "You'll tell it to me or you'll tell it to the court," Dundee said hotly. "This is murder, and don't you forget it." "Maybe. And here's something for you not to forget, sweetheart. I'll tell it or not, as I damn please. It's a long while since I burst out crying because a policeman didn't like me." Tom left the sofa and sat at the edge of the bed. His carelessly shaven, mud-smeared face was tired and lined. "Be reasonable, Sam," he pleaded. "Give us a chance. How can we turn up anything on Miles killing if you won't give us what you've got?" "You needn't get a headache over that," Spade told him. "I'll bury my dead." Lieutenant Dundee sat down and put his hands on his knees again. His eyes were warm green discs. "I thought you would," he said. He smiled with grim content. "That's just exactly why we came to see you, isn't it, Tom?" Tom groaned, but said nothing articulate. Spade watched Dundee warily. "That's just exactly what I said to Tom," the lieutenant went on. "I said, 'Tom, I've got a hunch that Sam Spade's a man to keep the family troubles in the family.' That's just what I said to him." The wariness went out of Spade's eyes. He made his eyes dull with boredom. He turned his face around to Tom and asked with great carelessness, "What's itching your boyfriend now?" Dundee jumped up and tapped Spade's chest with the ends of his two bent fingers. "Just this," he said, taking pains to make each word distinct, emphasizing them with his tapping finger ends. "Thursby was shot down in front of his hotel just 35 minutes after you left Barrett Street." Spade spoke, taking equal pains with his words. "Keep your goddamn paws off me." Dundee withdrew the tapping fingers, but there was no changing in his voice. "Tom says you were in too much of a hurry to even stop for a look at your partner." Tom growled apologetically. "Well, damn it, Sam, you did run off like that. And you didn't go to Archer's house to tell his wife," the lieutenant said. "We called up, and that girl in your office was there, and she said you sent her. Spade nodded. His face was stupid in its calmness. Lieutenant Dundee raised his two bent fingers toward Spade's chest, quickly lowered them, and said, "I give you 10 minutes to get to a phone and do your talking to the girl. I give you 10 minutes to get to Thursby's joint, Geary, near Leavenworth. You could do it easy in that time, or 15 at most, and that gives you 10 or 15 minutes of waiting before he showed up." "I knew where he lived," Spade said, "and I knew he hadn't gone straight home from killing Miles." "You knew that? You knew?" Dundee replied stubbornly. "What time did you get home?" 20 minutes to 4. "I walked around thinking things over." The lieutenant wagged his round head up and down. "We knew you weren't home by 3:30. We tried to get you on the phone, where you'd do your walking. Where did you do it?" "Out on Bush Street, away back." "Did you see anybody that—" No witnesses," Spade said and laughed pleasantly. "Sit down, Dundee. You haven't finished your drink. Get your glass, Tom." Tom said, "No thanks, Sam." Dundee sat down but paid no attention to his glass of rum. Spade filled his own glass, drank, set the empty glass on the table, and returned to his bedside. "I know where I stand now," he said, looking with friendly eyes from one police detective to the other. "I'm sorry I got up on my hind legs, but you birds coming in here and trying to put the work on me made me nervous. Having Miles knocked off bothered me, and then you birds crackling foxy. That's all right now, though, now that I know what you're up to." Tom said, "Forget it." The lieutenant said nothing. Spade asked, "Thursby die?" While the lieutenant hesitated, Tom said, "Yes." Then the lieutenant said angrily, "And you might just as well know it, if you don't, that he died before he could tell anybody anything." Spade was rolling a cigarette. He asked, not looking up, "What do you mean by that? You think I did know it?" "I meant what I said," Dundee replied bluntly. Spade looked up at him and smiled, holding a finished cigarette in one hand, his lighter in the other. "You're not exactly ready to pinch me yet, are you, Dundee?" he asked. Dundee looked with hard green eyes at Spade and did not answer him. "Then," said Spade, "there's no particular reason why I should give a damn what you think. Is there, Dundee?" Tom said, "Be reasonable, Sam." Spade put the cigarette in his mouth, set fire to it, and laughed smoke out. "I'll be reasonable, Tom," he promised. "How did I kill Thursby?" "I've forgotten." Tom grunted in disgust. Lieutenant Dundee said, "He was shot 4 times in the back with a .44 or .45 from across the street when he started to go in the hotel. Nobody saw it, but that's the way it figures. And he was wearing a Luger in a shoulder holster," Tom added. "It hadn't been fired." "What do the hotel people know about him?" Spade asked. "Nothing, except he'd been there a week." "Alone?" "Alone." What did you find on him? Or in his room?" Dundee drew his lips in and asked, "What do you think we'd find?" Spade made a careless circle with his limp cigarette. "Something to tell who he was, what his story was. Did you?" "We thought you could tell us that." Spade looked at the lieutenant with yellow-gray eyes that held an almost exaggerated amount of candor. "I've never seen Thursby, dead or alive." Lieutenant Dundee stood up, looking dissatisfied. Tom rose, yawning and stretching. "We've asked you what we came for, and what we came to ask," Dundee said, frowning eyes hard as green pebbles. He held his mustached upper lip tight to his teeth, letting his lower lip push words out. "We've told you more than you've told us. That's fair enough. You know me, Spade. If you did or didn't, you'll get a square deal out of me, and most of the breaks. I don't know that. I'd blame you a hell of a lot, but that wouldn't keep me from nailing you." "Fair enough," Spade replied evenly, "but I'd feel better about it if you'd drink your drink." Lieutenant Dundee turned to the table, picked up his glass, and slowly emptied it. Then he said, "Good night," and held out his hand. They shook hands ceremoniously. Tom and Spade shook hands ceremoniously, too. Spade let them out. Then he undressed, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Well, that was the end of Chapter 2. Well, this is very interesting and a good start to this classic detective novel. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I hope my reading of it isn't too bad. I'm trying to give a little feeling to the characters, but it is a little difficult too. Anyway, we will continue this story tomorrow night. This has been Indiana Holmes. Love to you all, and good night.
Please hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications button. Thank you very much.